Tonight, newly released autopsy results are raising more questions about how Nolan Wells died. An independent exam commissioned by his family's legal team classified the cause and manner of death for the 18-year-old as undetermined pending investigation.
He's saying based on the examination of the body, he cannot rule out foul play. That is significant.
The forensic pathologist wrote there were no fractures, cuts, or bruises on Nolan's body, but noted red discoloration was found on the back of his head and needs more investigation. The autopsy was performed 4 days after his body was found. The pathologist also writing there were missing parts of the neck.
Have you or he asked anyone for access to those things?
Hopefully that the medical examiner will allow him to come and examine the throat, also to talk about observations that they had, and so they could share information.
It is not unusual for a state medical examiner to keep parts for further evaluation. Former medical examiner Dr. Priya Banerjee reviewed the autopsy report.
I think the best thing we can take away is that there's no identifiable trauma.
The Jackson County Sheriff's Office is still investigating what happened after Nolan went to Horn Island in a boat with friends on July 4th. His body was found 2 days later washed ashore there. Today, the family's attorney noted the doctor was unable to examine the airways and lungs for water to determine drowning. In a recent interview, Warren Hudson says he'd been friends with Nolan since they were kids. Hudson said they frequently went boating and they went to Horn Island with a large group of friends on July 4th.
Everybody's drinking, it's 4th of July. Everyone's just trying to enjoy themselves.
Nolan was an 18-year-old, a wide receiver, a month out from turning 19. Built like someone who'd spent his whole life in motion. And here's the detail his father keeps returning to, the one that makes this whole thing sit wrong. He could swim. Not sort of. Not well enough. He could swim. So what happened in the hour before that boat left? Ask the girl he'd spent the afternoon with and you get one answer. He was heading back to his friends. Ask the friends and you get the opposite. He'd decided to stay. Same beach. Same young man. Same handful of minutes. Two accounts that cannot both be true. I want you to hold on to that, because everything that follows is built on top of it. By 11 that night, one of his friends was on the phone with the Coast Guard. By midnight, his mother was on the phone with the sheriff. She'd fed him dinner the evening before. A hug, a kiss, an ordinary Friday she had no reason to memorize. That's the last of him she gets to keep. 2 mornings later, a park ranger walking the far end of the island found him. And then this family waited. 2.5 weeks of nothing. No cause, no manner, no autopsy, no answers. His phone eventually came back to them with an entire day missing off it. At his funeral, Al Sharpton said it as plainly as anyone has. He was not on that island by himself. Then, 3 weeks in a packed hall in Chicago, an attorney stood up and read aloud from an independent pathologist report. And there was something in it. Something on the back of this young man's head, measured, photographed, written into the record, that the doctor who found it could not explain. He also could not rule out the one thing this mother has been afraid of since the first night. I'll show you exactly what he found, exactly how big it is, and exactly why he still refused to call this an accident. But we're getting there in order, because this case has been wrecked once already by people racing to the ending. This one is heavy. We go deep into autopsy findings tonight, internal examination, decomposition, what a second look at a body can and can't reveal, plus sustained discussion of drowning. It's clinical and it's graphic. None of it is here for shock. But if you've lost someone recently, or this one hits close, give yourself permission to skip it. Welcome back to the Crime Executioner Facts First, always. New here? Subscribe and hit the bell. Let's get into it. The morning of July 6 broke clear over Horn Island. A National Park Service agent walking the shoreline found Nolan Wells in the water off the beach, at the northwestern end of the island. The same general stretch where hundreds of people had gathered 2 days earlier. He had been in the water since sometime on the 4th. 36 hours, give or take. The search that his mother had helped set in motion ended not with a rescue, but with a recovery. Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lynn Jr. responded. His job at that moment was narrow and specific. Assess what was visible, and decide what happens next. He told CNN there were no immediate, obvious signs of foul play or trauma. That sentence has been quoted more often than almost anything else in this case, usually as proof that nothing criminal occurred. It was never meant to carry that weight. A coroner working at a recovery scene is not conducting an examination. He is making a preliminary read, in the open air, on a body that has been in salt water for a day and a half. What he can see is limited by definition, and Lind himself made that clear by what he did next. Because of the uncertain circumstances, he requested a full autopsy at the state medical examiner's office, so they could determine whether there was any foul play or trauma at all. That request is the tell. A coroner confident he was looking at a straightforward drowning does not ask for a full workup. The Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office performed that autopsy on July 7th, one day after the recovery. It was the first examination, conducted closest in time to the fourth, by the office with the most complete access to everything the water had left behind. Then something small happened that tells you a great deal about how this case has traveled. For weeks, a specific detail circulated everywhere, that Nolan was found fully clothed. It ran through social media, through commentary channels, through discussion threads, treated as established fact and used as evidence that something had gone wrong. On July 22nd, the United Cajun Navy corrected it publicly. He had not been fully clothed. He was wearing swim trunks. A young man on a beach in July, dressed for a beach in July. The detail that had been carried as a red flag turned out to be the most ordinary thing about that day. Nobody invented it maliciously. It came from an imprecise comment, repeated until repetition made it true. That is how this case has moved from the beginning. So by July 7th, two things were in motion. The state had its examination, and a family that did not believe what they were being told had already begun arranging for a second one. Todd Terrell has spent years pulling people out of water that most people never think about. As president of the United Cajun Navy, he took a seaplane up over Horn Island during the search, covering ground no boat could. He knows that particular stretch of coast. And what he describes about it is worth sitting with.
That any parent who, God forbid, would be in our situation, I would hope that you would do the same thing. I would hope that you would ask for any help, receive any help to get answers, because at the end of the day, that's all we want. We just want to know. We just want to know what happened and why our baby didn't come home. Like that's our biggest thing.
Because it changes the arithmetic of what happened there. The water off the northwestern end of the island is full of rip currents, and they are strong. But the detail that matters most is the floor beneath them. According to Terrell, the depth in that area can go from 2 or 3 feet to 20 feet within a couple of steps. 2 steps. That is the entire margin. It means a person can be standing, chest out of the water, in full control, on solid sand, and then not be. There is no waiting out. There is no gradual deepening that gives you time to reconsider. The bottom simply stops, and a current that has been pulling at your ankles now has all of you. This is not obscure local knowledge. The National Park Service routinely cautions visitors to check current conditions before visiting the Gulf Islands National Seashore. The warning exists because the danger is documented and constant, and because the water on a bright holiday afternoon looks exactly as harmless as water that has never hurt anyone. Terrell also offered an assessment about where Nolan was found. In his view, based on how that water behaves, the body likely did not travel far from wherever things went wrong, which brings the whole question closer to shore and closer to the crowd. Now, the family's answer to all of this has been consistent from the first week, and it is not unreasonable. Nolan could swim, not casually. His father described him as an elite athlete, and that was not a grieving parent reaching for a compliment. It was a description of a young man who trained, who competed, whose body was conditioned to perform under strain. Here is the difficulty. Both things are true at once, and neither one settles anything. Rip currents are not defeated by fitness. They pull faster than a person can swim against, and the reflex to fight them directly is what exhausts strong swimmers specifically, the ones with enough power to try. Athletic ability can turn a rip current from a scare into a fatality precisely because it delays the moment a person gives up and floats. So the water explains how this could have happened without anyone doing anything wrong. It does not explain why it did. And it explains nothing at all about what was found on shore afterward. Or rather, what wasn't. When the boat left Horn Island that afternoon, Nolan's phone left with it. His friends had it. So did his keys. Think about what that means practically. An 18-year-old tells a group he's finding another ride home, and then stays behind on an island with no facilities, no shelter, and no way to call anyone. without the device that would let him arrange that ride, and without the keys he would need once he reached the mainland. His parents have asked that question publicly and repeatedly, not as an accusation, as a puzzle that doesn't fit the explanation they've been given. If he chose to stay, he chose to stay stranded and unreachable, on a strip of sand where the tide was already going out on the day. The phone eventually came back to the family, and when they looked at it, according to the family, messages had been deleted. That is the sentence that detonated across the internet. It is also the sentence that requires the most care, because of what it is and what it isn't. What the family did was open a phone and look at it. That is a parent scrolling through a device, searching for their son, finding less than they expected. It is honest. It is troubling. It is not forensic evidence. A phone can be missing content for reasons that have nothing to do with anyone hiding anything. Applications delete on their own schedules. Content expires. Settings that a teenager configured months ago and forgot about keep running regardless of what happens to him. None of that can be sorted out by looking. It can only be sorted out by extraction, by pulling the underlying data and reading what the device recorded about itself, including when files were removed and by what action. That process has now been arranged, and the arrangement itself is notable. Ben Crump's team and investigators from the sheriff's office agreed to inspect the contents together. Attorney Eric Hertz is helping lead the family's investigative team, working with former law enforcement experts on the download, so that every party sees the contents at the same moment. That structure matters more than it sounds. It means neither side can characterize the results before the other has seen them. In a case where both sides have accused each other of controlling information, a simultaneous review removes the possibility of a version being shaped in the gap between discovery and disclosure. There is one more complication, and it goes back to the island itself. Horn Island has no communications infrastructure. Consumer location applications depend on network signal to update. On a strip of sand with no service, packed with hundreds of people all reaching for the same non-existent coverage, the data those apps produce is unreliable by design. Gaps in it are not evidence of anything. They are what you would expect, which is why the extraction is the only thing that will settle this. But before it could happen, the phone stopped being a forensic question and became something else entirely, because a rumor had already attached itself to it, one that came with audio. A recording surfaced on social media after the news broke. Shaky footage, water, boats, a crowd, and underneath it, a voice raised in anger. People listened to it and heard a young black man shouting. They listened again and thought they could make out a demand for a phone. And in a case where a phone had gone missing, that was enough. Within days, that clip was being presented across the internet as the last recording of Nolan Wells alive, and as evidence that his final moments involved a confrontation with the people he came with. It was neither. The voice belongs to Trayston Shepard. He is 20 years old. He was one of Nolan's close friends. And he has now explained, on the record and by name, what that recording actually captured. Shepard was standing in waist-deep water that afternoon, having a disagreement with his girlfriend. A private argument, in a crowded place. A young man about his own age walked past and made a comment about their conversation. An acquaintance from a nearby town who had not come over on a boat with Shepard, and had not come over with Nolan either. Shepard told him to mind his own business. The exchange escalated. It turned physical. Shepard's uncle, the man who raised him like a father, told him to get out of the water and onto the boat so they could go home. Shepard did what he was told. Then, standing on the deck, he changed his mind. He wanted to go back. His friends had started defending him on the shore, and the whole thing swelled outward the way these things do on a beach full of people who have been drinking in the sun since morning. That is when an adult on a nearby boat started filming. The footage went nowhere for 2 days. Then Nolan was found, and the person who recorded it posted it, and a private argument between two young men who had nothing to do with him became the centerpiece of a national mystery. Shepard said it plainly on Good Morning America. That's him yelling. He explained he was in an altercation and had to be restrained. He is not alone in saying so. Javon Williams, who was also on the island that day, independently identified the voice as Shepard's rather than Nolan's. None of this means investigators dismissed it. Authorities have confirmed they are looking into reports of an altercation on the island on July 4th and whether it involved Nolan at all. The Sheriff's Department has asked the public for original, unedited photographs and video from that day, specifically material that shows alleged altercations or that people believe includes Nolan. Note the word unedited. What circulates online has been clipped, compressed, and reposted dozens of times over. Investigators want files with their metadata intact. And there is other footage now. TMZ reported obtaining a separate video from that afternoon, recorded amid the party. It pans across a scene crowded with boats and people, before settling on a man standing on the back deck of a vessel, appearing to bend down for a drink. His face is never visible. What drew attention is the color of his trunks, which matches those Nolan wore in the widely shared photograph taken with his friends that morning. The boat was anchored in neck-deep water and carried a couple of older adults, with several others gathered nearby. That footage is now with investigators. Whether the man in it is Nolan has not been established. And then there is the photograph. A picture circulated showing Nolan in a large group at a pool party, drink containers visible in the background, offered up as a window into his character or his habits. It was shared from Ben Crump's own Instagram account before he was questioned about it. A reminder that misinformation in this case has not traveled in only one direction. Step back and look at what that adds up to. The single most cited piece of evidence in this entire case, the recording that shaped how millions of people understood Nolan's final hours, was a different argument between different people about something else entirely. It took a 20-year-old going on national television to correct it. Millions had already decided. That is why we do these updates the way we do. We wait for the record, we name our sources, and when something turns out to be wrong, we tell you it was wrong. If that's the version of this case you want, subscribe. The next development is coming, and we'll cover it the same way. There is one thing in this case that no amount of public argument can settle. Only a pathologist can. The family wanted someone with no connection to Mississippi. They got one. Dr. Roger A. Mitchell is a board-certified forensic pathologist and the president of the National Medical Association, the oldest and largest organization of black physicians in the United States. He spent 7 years as chief medical examiner in Washington, D.C. His independence from the agencies involved in this case is not a matter of opinion. He has no professional relationship with any of them. The examination took place on July 10th in Washington, 6 days after Nolan disappeared and 4 days after he was recovered. Mitchell sent his findings to Ben Crump on July 19th. His conclusion was 2 words long. Cause of death, undetermined. Manner of death, undetermined. Pending further investigation. Not drowning. Not accident. Not homicide. A pathologist with full access to a body and no institutional pressure in any direction looked at everything available to him and declined to name what killed this young man. The report does contain one finding that Mitchell flagged for further attention. He documented an area of red discoloration in tissue at the back of the head. The report notes the reason for it as unknown. That is the whole of it. No accompanying fracture of the skull beneath it. No break in the skin above it. An area of discoloration, documented, photographed, entered into the record, and left unexplained by the man who found it. It would be easy to hear that and assume the worst. It would also be easy to hear it and assume the opposite. Both would be guesses, and this case has suffered enough from guesses. So here is what an outside expert says about it. Dr. Kendall Von Crowns is the chief medical examiner in Tarrant County, Texas. He has no involvement in this case, no relationship with either examination, and nothing to gain from either conclusion. Asked what that finding could represent, he gave 2 answers and gave them equal weight. It could represent decompositional changes of the musculature, the ordinary consequence of time and water, meaning nothing about how the death occurred. Or it could be from blunt force injury to the back of the head and neck. 2 explanations. One of them is entirely innocent. One of them is not. And an experienced medical examiner reviewing the same information cannot tell you which, because the finding as documented supports both. That is the honest state of the evidence. Anyone telling you otherwise is telling you what they want to be true. Now, the part of this that has received the least attention and deserves the most. When Mitchell conducted his examination, portions of Nolan's throat were not there. The Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office had retained them. Mitchell's own report describes that retention as a common forensic pathology practice, and it is. An office that examines a body first and has questions about the neck will hold those structures for further study. That is not misconduct, it is procedure, and Mitchell, who ran a medical examiner's office himself, said as much in writing. But the consequence is real regardless of the intent. Mitchell reported that his examination was inconclusive in part because of it. The structures most relevant to answering certain questions about the neck were unavailable to the second examiner. His report also contained no toxicology. That testing sits with the state. The state's response has been narrow and consistent. The Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office said its autopsy was performed in accordance with the standard procedures and protocols followed for all autopsies. It declined to comment on the independent examination at all, and it urged the public to remain patient and to avoid drawing conclusions before the investigation is complete. So consider where that leaves things. This family did what almost no family in their position can afford to do. They commissioned a second, fully independent examination by a nationally credentialed pathologist, specifically to get around the possibility that the first one had missed something or shaded something. They got a second examination. What they did not get was a second answer. Because the two examinations happened in sequence rather than in parallel, the second one inherited the limits of the first. The office that looked first had everything. The office that looked second had what remained. Two of the most qualified pathologists in the country have now examined this young man, and the result is not more certainty than one examination would have produced. It is less. While the pathologist worked, this stopped being a Mississippi story. On July 18th, the NAACP National Board of Directors adopted a resolution. It called on local, state, and federal authorities, explicitly including the United States Department of Justice, to complete an in-depth and openly transparent review of how Nolan came to be left on that island, and of everything that happened in the hours before he was recovered. Derrick Johnson, the organization's president and chief executive, was direct about why. He criticized the police investigation, and he made a point worth repeating carefully. He said it was important to complete a full investigation before speculating about whether this was an accident. Note what that is and isn't. It is not a claim that a crime occurred. It is a claim that the process itself has not yet earned anyone's confidence. 2 days later, on July 20, they buried him. The service was held at Center Point Church in Ocean Springs, after the family moved away from an earlier discussion about a much larger venue. They chose a church instead. Reverend Al Sharpton officiated. During the eulogy, Sharpton announced a $50,000 reward through his organization, the National Action Network, for information leading to an arrest and conviction. Before he finished speaking, Tyler Perry, who had paid for the service, sent word by text that he would match it. That made $100,000, pledged in the space of a single eulogy. The following day, Terrell Owens, who had attended the funeral, added $25,000 more. $125,000, offered to anyone who knows something and hasn't said it. There is also a federal presence, though not the one people assume. The FBI's Jackson office has been supporting Jackson County investigators, ready to assist when federal resources could expand their capacity. Separately, and this is the part almost nobody has covered, the Bureau has been working to address interstate threats received by individuals connected to this matter. People tied to this case are being threatened across state lines. That is now its own federal workload, running alongside the actual death investigation. The attention has been extraordinary. Spike Lee attended the July 10th press conference in New York. And here is the uncomfortable truth underneath all of it. National organizations, national figures, a six-figure reward, federal attention, and not one of them has produced a single new fact about what happened to Nolan Wells on that island. Pressure is not evidence. It can force a process to move. It cannot tell you what the process will find. Which leaves one question: where does a case like this actually go from here? It goes to a room in Pascagoula, and then to a grand jury. Christine and Elmore Wansley met with Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath, the first time the parents had sat down with the prosecutor since their son was recovered. Their lawyers described it afterward as a respectful meeting. McElrath told them that once the sheriff's investigation is complete, she will present the findings to a grand jury. That body will determine whether there was any criminal wrongdoing and whether anyone should be indicted. What she could not do was tell them what the investigation has found. Prosecutors do not brief families on an active case, and she didn't. The family left knowing the process and not the substance. That distinction has defined their experience of the last 3 weeks. Their attorneys have said that officials with the sheriff's department have not shared updates on the investigation's findings in the days since the recovery. The sheriff's office has been publicly quiet. Sheriff John Ledbetter has spoken to the frustration directly. He said he knows time is of the essence, and that people want answers immediately, but that getting accurate information takes time, and it's going to take a lot of hard work. Both things can be true. An investigation that moves carefully looks identical from the outside to an investigation that isn't moving at all. Families cannot tell the difference, and neither can the public. What the department is still doing publicly is asking. It continues to solicit video, photographs, and first-hand accounts from anyone who was on or near the island that day. If you were there, or you know someone who was, the tip line is 888-991-1772. Now, one correction, because this is where coverage of this case is about to go badly wrong. A grand jury is not a trial, it is not an accusation, it does not mean prosecutors believe a crime occurred. The district attorney's office has been explicit about this. Convening a grand jury is standard procedure for most unnatural or suspicious deaths in that county. It is what happens when someone dies in circumstances that aren't fully explained, which is precisely the situation here. When that referral is announced, you will see headlines suggesting a case is being built against someone. That is not what is happening. It is a legal mechanism for reviewing an unexplained death, and it applies whether the answer turns out to be a crime or a current. So the machinery is in motion, and none of it will resolve anything on its own. 3 things will. The first is toxicology. It sits with the state. It was not part of the independent report, and it is the only test that can separate a drowning from everything that mimics one. Nothing gets ruled out until it lands. The second is the phone. Not what anyone thinks is missing from it. What the extraction actually shows, reviewed by both sides at the same moment. The third is access. Whether Mississippi opens its records, its photographs and its retained material to Dr. Mitchell, so that for the first time one pathologist can see everything rather than half. Toxicology will almost certainly come first. It's already in process, and it doesn't require anyone to agree to anything. 2 examinations, 2 agencies, 1 family that has spent 3 weeks asking questions that got harder, not easier, the more people looked. Ben Crump put it as plainly as anyone could. They still have more questions than answers. That is not a conclusion. It is an honest description of where this stands tonight. When toxicology drops, we'll cover it the way we covered this, with the document on screen, the sources named, and nothing added. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you get it from us, and not from a comment section.